Hi, it's Gadget UK here again. A quick revisit on Ghetto drive here. You saw Barry sent me some other JU-253s. One of them, obviously, I've got the switch mechanism, but it's a different revision. It's got a different PCB here and stuff. They varied a fair bit, these 253s. But the transistor, I'll show you, I actually managed to source them. And how I was able to do that is I thought to myself, maybe there's a service manual for this because it's a Panasonic. And yeah, that's exactly what I found. I found the service manual. So a little bit later on, after I've fitted this transistor, you'll see, I'll show you the schematics. It's not directly related to the ready signal. What that seems to do, that transistor, the one we bodged on there in the previous video, is PNP. The correct part number is 2SB766A, I think. We fitted a BC212, I think, if memory serves. Anyway, I'm going to remove that, fit one of those, and we'll test that, make sure that works. But you can get the replacement transistors. In the schematics, I found that particular transistor, and it provides like a 5-volt switched power rail to, I think, the stepper and the heads. So this explains why, you know, when it was breaking down, we could hear like a step noise, but it wasn't moving the motor, because there was not enough voltage and current to allow the motor to move. So that explains it, but obviously there'll be an indirect relationship to the timing of the ready signal, because if the drive's not spinning and the stepper's not working and stuff, you know, yeah, everything else is going to get knocked out as a consequence. But I just thought it would be interesting to show you that, show you the schematics. But first of all, let's just make sure this is still working. Let me just power it on. It's a Pi Storm in this at the moment, so it's going to take a good 20 or 30 seconds before it'll start to boot from floppy, but it should do, I think. We'll just make sure it's still working, and then we'll get this transistor, one of them, on. It wasn't too bad, it was like £2 odd for 10, so I figure the general purpose PNPs, aren't they? And we booted okay from the disk there, so let's go to floppy drive. We'll just do two things, calibration, and we'll go forwards, backwards. And that was the thing, it was all about stepping. The voltage was not there on the stepper. And that was another reason why the clue, when you went backwards by 10, that was where predominantly the issue happened, until the drive was warm. Of course, until we realised it was the transistor. And we'll do a retest. Just let that go all the way through. I always find it interesting, the timing differences on these ready signals, they vary. And these 235s, or 253? Yeah, 253 drives, they vary quite a lot. You can run this for 10 minutes and do that, and you might get 280 milliseconds after the motor run, just as a result of it warming up. Getting near the end now, but I think you'll agree, that drive's spot on. Yay. Yeah, and there is the transistor we bodged on. So, yeah, going to try and come in a bit of a weird angle here, just try and heat 2 or 3 of the pins at the same time until it frees itself up. It's easier said than done when you've got 3 points like that. Up. Yeah, I'm doing this with the wrong hand really, there we go. Wow, that transistor's hot. So that transistor has got legs, so it's got legs long enough to reuse that somewhere else, but you can see the part number on it, BC212. So I'll put that with the other 212s, I'll straighten the legs out first. In any case, if we now mop up the solder off, certainly 2 of those pads there. We'll do the ground tab as well. Hang on a minute, there we go. Like that, that should do, I think. Get one of these on, so this should have the right pin out, because, well, I think it's the right part. Of course, when you get these things sometimes from AliExpress and China, eBay, you don't always know, you know, it's got that part number on it. Is it really that transistor? Or is it what they class as a generic, you know, general purpose replacement that's got the right pin out and falls into roughly the same characteristics? You know, it's got the same thing underneath, look there, the point, the ground point, or not ground point, the tab, you know. I think it's the same because it looks like the same code. Is it marked BR or something? That's what, yeah, that's what the previous one looked like. So, and that's the thing, sometimes manufacturers have that little 2-digit code there that allows you to try and find out what it is, but, well, it's not always easy. All I did there is just move around just so I can get my right hand in to do the soldering. And maybe use Kavanos tweezers. Let me get the tweezers. So we've got focus, let's just try and grab it. and heat this point here. It's like it's not sinking down very low, that. Let's just have a bit of a press there. Oh god. You know, I had it perfectly straight and then I just bodged it up totally. Right, that's fairly straight there. I could have removed more solder from those pads in retrospect. You know, that's why it feels like maybe it's floating up a bit at the back here. Let's just try and get some solder down there, maybe. Up. I just can't get the right angle with the iron. It's just consequences of trying to film. Yeah, you can see this kind of a hollow gap underneath that. There, and that's why the solder just flowed through the bottom here. Do you see that? It actually flowed underneath there because it's all one giant connection if you think about it. On that one, I can't get the right angle. Yeah, so you can argue the amount of solder that was there originally was right, and then I just added too much. It doesn't matter. Additional solder like that just helps heat sink something. So, that's not really a big deal. Right, let me just clean around that and we'll give it a try. Yeah, I'm going to toothbrush around it because I can't really get in between the pins and things there. I just feel like it'll come out a little bit tidier if I toothbrush it. So, I've got a transistor sized hole there, look. Some IPA on the toothbrush here and just have a bit of a scrub like that. Quite a lot of IPA around there, that's coming off. Right, that's not too bad. Move these tweezers out of the way, they were showing on the board. Get the disc into the drive here, and let's just carefully switch it on and see what happens. Hopefully it doesn't burst into flames. It does take a while for the PyStorm to boot. PyStorm is not the best thing to use, there you go, when you're trying to test things. But that works. Fantastic. Sounds fine, looks fine. I didn't think that would have any adverse effect because we put the proper transistor it should have on it. Do a full read again as well, but anyway, I'm going to call that done. And it was, yeah, only a short video, but I just felt it was like worth just revisiting really to cover those few things. So I marked up the bag PNP just so I know that those are PNP without having to look up a data sheet or something. I could write the base collector emitter on there. I'll do that at some other point. I'm just cleaning off the solder from those legs which have just straightened out. Yeah, the middle one's a bit longer than the other two. But the legs on that are long enough to go into a board to replace a faulty transistor. So I'll put that back with the other BC212s. Yeah, as an added extra here, something else I just thought I'd show you. We've got a little block thing here. You know, it stops you sticking anything in that pin. Now, the drive I am dealing with here, the one I want to use as my main test drive, this drive has all of the pins there. Yeah, that second pin, pin 2, whatever it is, it might be pin 3 or 4, is there. So this cable, even though it's fully wired, stops me sticking it in, which I've never seen on an Amiga cable. Well, this is apparently an original Amiga cable. It came from a 500 or something. And I was just looking at one of the other Amiga drives I've got, and that doesn't have that pin. That pin is removed on the actual drive. So yeah, you can argue this is just not needed, but I'm just going to pull it out because, well, I'd like to be able to use this cable with either of my drives. Anyway, that's the first time I've ever had to do that on one of those. Of course, you do need to pay attention to where pin 1 is. Yeah, pin 1 on this drive is up here, I think. I know it doesn't, it just about fits. It fits under there, makes it very tight. So I could have left that in place anyway. I'm not going to fuss around that too much. I'd rather have it that way so that I can get this cable either way round. I always know where pin 1 is because I always stick the stripe to pin 1. And as far as I know, it's just a fully wired cable though. And if we have a look at the schematics here, you can see at the top there, Q3, that's the transistor. We'll look at the part number of that in a minute on the list of parts. And if you look at the 5 volts comes into its collector, and on the base comes from the PS1 on that chip there, and the emitter provides 5 VB. And that's the key here. I was trying to work out where that goes, and it goes there on that connector. As we scroll down, 2 main parts of the functionality here use that. You can see 5 VB go into the track 0 sensor, highlighting that there. And just above that, the stepper mower. Remember the stepper mower was moving slow? And not at all, even in fact at one point, there you go, 5 VB. So that's the thing, it was affecting track 0 and the stepper. It may be used elsewhere on this drive, I don't know. Having a quick glance over, I can't see it. And from that same service manual, you can see here the transistor Q2, Q3, Q6 were all the same type. Yeah, so it's looking a bit dusty here. Massive thanks to Barry for sending these drives. He sent me a load of different drives, so we're going to be looking at some of those, you know, throughout the next few years. Don't worry, I'm not going to overload you with drive after drive after drive on the main channel. Do check out the main channel. We've got over 800, 900 videos on there now. You know, more in-depth repairs, full systems, etc., with a lot more information. I waffle a lot more on there. You know, an hour-long video is typically what you'll see on the main channel. Anyway, thanks to Barry for sending those drives. Yeah, this now obviously is back to factory spec there. And I guess the point in this video is on branded floppy drives, always go check for data sheets because, you know, a schematic or a service manual. And that's the thing, the manual, I only showed you the schematics here and the parts list page, but there's a lot more information. It's a full service manual. It shows you everything to scope and check and all the calibration things and everything. So yeah, these Panasonic ones, Matsushita here, there are generally always a service manual for them. Same with Sony and brands like that. Sometimes the TIAC ones are hard to find, and the Chinon ones, I don't even think there's any. I don't think I've ever seen anything for Chinon. I could be wrong. The bottom line is though, the branded drives, a lot of the time you'll find service manuals for them. And there's a reason kind of behind that. They weren't bespoke just to the Amiga. This one perhaps was customized for the Amiga, but you probably saw JU-253s or 53A or B or something in PCs back in the day. So they were much more commonly distributed, and yeah, the manufacturers behind them, you know, provided service manuals. And I guess the final point is, you know, we had a general purpose PNP transistor there. You could, and I could do this now, but I invite you to go and have a look at the data sheet on the BC212 and then the transistor we fitted here, and just have a look at the differences, and you probably find a ballpark in the source. You know, it will probably do the job. The transistor that was there, I could have left it. So yeah, with things like this where it's maybe low current, low voltage, you can use a general purpose transistor to get you out of a tight corner if you don't know what the transistor is. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, please see the coffee and Patreon links down below. I'll catch you in the next video.